Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep into a world
Ooh.
where superheroes and global conspiracies kind of like crash right into each other.
Wow.
And it's all seen through the lens of media manipulation.
Okay.
You guys sent us some excerpts and notes on Earth's Mightiest. It's like a graphic novel, I guess, in the making. And it's really got me thinking, it's like, how easy is it, even for people with,
Yeah.
superpowers, to be swayed by like a carefully crafted narrative?
Well, it's fascinating how this fictional world, right? You've got superpowered people, alien invasions,
Yeah.
still grapples with something that's like so real world. It's
Right.
how that mainstream media can really shape how the public sees things.
Yeah, so the story is set like 20 years after this invasion. These things, it's called Terrarians.
Okay.
The world's still like picking up the pieces. And then this powerful figure, his name's Avram. He's also called like the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of rises to prominence. He's a superhero. But his ideology, like it's something else, some red flags maybe.
Yeah, and that's where the media manipulation really starts to show itself.
Yeah.
The story uses like this made-up news outlet. They call it BNN.
Okay.
It's showing how this pro-Israel narrative gets pushed. And
Yeah.
it's not like subtle, blatant propaganda a lot of times.
Oh, for sure. It's not subtle at all. We see Avram like making these inflammatory statements about Palestinians.
Yeah.
Even comparing them to like biblical figures who are, associated with evil.
Oh, wow.
It's like the story saying, hey, look how language can be used as like a weapon.
Right, to demonize
Yeah.
entire groups of people.
Exactly.
And, it's important to remember, like, the story isn't endorsing
Oh, right.
these
Yeah.
viewpoints. It's using them to explore how propaganda can be this tool, right?
Yeah.
To twist the truth
Yeah.
and control what people believe. Like, a prime example, you have Stratos.
Okay.
He's like this world Superman.
Okay, got it.
At first, he totally buys into everything the media is telling him, especially through, this BNN.
Right.
Yeah.
But then like things start to kind of fall apart for him.
Exactly.
There's this super powerful scene.
Yeah.
He sees this Palestinian girl. She's wearing a red coat.
Mm-hmm.
And later,
Oh, wow.
she's killed by an Israeli sniper. It's
Yeah.
like, boom, that image just shatters everything.
Oh, yeah.
He starts to question everything he thought he knew.
It's like that red coat becomes this, like, symbol, this
Yeah.
stark reminder
Yeah.
of the real human cost of this
Yeah.
conflict.
It's especially jarring because it's like the complete opposite of the image of Israel we see in Avram's movie.
Oh, right.
It's called Shabbat Goy.
Yeah. His Oscar-winning movie.
Yeah. And you can feel how messed up Stratos is, like cognitively,
Oh, yeah.
when he finds these awful organ harvesting facilities that are targeting Palestinians.
Yeah, it's like a punch in the gut.
Right. It is. He finds out that Israeli doctors were like petitioning to tear down Palestinian hospitals.
What?
So Palestinians would have to go to Israeli facilities, essentially making them like
Right.
captive.
Captive population
Yeah.
for these horrible practices.
And that clash between Stratos and Avram, that's where the story really
Yeah.
shines a light on how dangerous it
Yeah.
can be
Right.
to just accept those mainstream narratives.
Sure.
Stratos, he was this symbol of American patriotism.
Right.
He calls out the hypocrisy and the messed up stuff that's being justified by this carefully crafted media narrative.
It's so powerful.
What's interesting is how the story makes these connections to real-world groups.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it mentions AIPAC.
Okay.
It's a powerful pro-Israel lobbying group.
Right.
And it talks about how it influences policy and even like silences people who disagree.
Through things like anti-BDS laws.
It's not explained like super clearly. But people who know about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict
Yeah.
will probably recognize the connection to how people try to silence any criticism of Israel in the real world.
Absolutely. It's like they're pulling back the curtain,
Yeah.
showing how these influences reach all the way to the top.
Yeah.
It suggests that even presidents can be, beholden to these interests, often putting the Jericho War
Oh, yeah.
above the needs of their own people.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though, is this fictional world really that different from ours? Like, how much of what we see and hear
Yeah.
is actually shaped by these powerful forces that want to control the narrative?
It's a question worth asking, for sure. And maybe that's one of the big takeaways from this deep dive.
Yeah.
Recognizing that media manipulation is a real thing, both in this fictional world and our own,
Yeah.
is like the first step to becoming smarter about the information we take in.
Okay, so we have BNN, this dominant pro-Israel voice, But then the story also introduces this website, The Gifted.
Oh, interesting.
It seems to be aimed specifically at the superhero community.
Okay.
And it offers this different perspective on things. It's almost like the story's hinting at how alternative sources of information can challenge those mainstream narratives.
That's a good point.
It makes me think of how, in our world, independent media, online platforms, they can sometimes give us these counter-narratives.
Yeah.
They can give a voice to people who might be excluded from the mainstream.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that we have a choice, right, in where we get our information.
Yeah, and that looking for those diverse voices, those different perspectives, can be incredibly valuable.
Right.
Especially when we're trying to understand really complex and controversial issues.
But even then, we got to remember, right? Even those alternative spaces.
Oh, for sure.
They can be susceptible to bias and manipulation.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not about just blindly trusting someone because they're different.
Right, exactly.
It's about realizing that information's almost never neutral.
Yeah.
And being critical of the sources and their biases is so important.
Earth's Mightiest seems to be pushing us to be active in shaping how we understand the world, not just passive receivers of like prepackaged stories.
So we've got BNN as this, dominant media force.
Right.
We have this alternative space with The Gifted. And then somewhere in between, there's the organization.
Oh, right.
This secretive group that Jinx and Bully are a part of. What do you think about their role in all of this?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, I think. The organization, they operate in secret with their own internal hierarchy and code of conduct. It makes you think, even within groups that seem independent, there can be power dynamics that affect how information's shared and understood.
It's like a miniature version of that larger issue of information control.
Exactly.
Even when you think you're outside the mainstream, you're not necessarily free from manipulation. Kind of a sobering thought.
It is. It highlights how important critical thinking is, no matter the source. Big news network or a niche online community. We've got to be asking questions, thinking about motivations, looking for different perspectives to form our own educated opinions.
All right, so we've seen how the story uses BNN to show how powerful the mainstream media is in shaping narratives.
Right.
But there's this other element that makes things even more complex.
Okay.
The idea of the chosen people.
Yes, a concept often linked to Jewish identity.
Right.
But the story seems to be using it to highlight how it can be twisted, you know, to justify actions that are harmful and assert dominance over others.
There's this one scene where Avram's, frustrated because he didn't win an award. And he says, "Fuck politics, we're the chosen people. We're the ones who are supposed to be the role model."
Wow.
That line really hit me hard.
Yeah.
Because it shows his sense of entitlement and exceptionalism.
Yeah, and that's not just a one-off thing. Throughout the story, Avram keeps using this chosen people rhetoric to justify what he does, claiming a right to power and control over everyone else.
It's like a messed up reflection of some real-world supremacist ideologies that use religious or ethnic identity to say, we're better than you and we're in control. But it's important to point out,
Oh, absolutely.
that the story doesn't say all Jewish people are part of this.
Of course not.
There are characters like Night Ninja. He's a Jewish superhero who's clearly struggling with his own identity and how he fits into a world where his people are both victims and perpetrators of injustice.
It's complex.
And then there's Stratos, who, even though he was initially swayed by the pro-Israel stuff, he ends up rejecting it. He even uses his knowledge of Jewish culture to criticize what Avram's doing.
That's powerful.
He points out how hypocritical it is to want a purely Jewish state while still relying on Palestinian labor.
It's a great point.
It's a powerful moment, I think, because it shows that even someone who is initially influenced by that dominant narrative can break free and challenge it.
It gives me hope.
So we have this complex web of mainstream media manipulation, alternative sources of information, and then the potential for bias and control even within smaller groups. It's a lot to take in, but it feels like the story is really making us think critically about how information is presented and how it can be used to influence how we see things.
It is. And I think it's a good time to move on to another interesting part of the story. The Protocol of Elder Jawa. Clearly a play on the real-world protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a really awful anti-Semitic text. But in the story, this protocol, Elder Jawa, it's presented as a positive philosophy. Kind of a fascinating twist, I think.
It is. It's like the story's directly challenging those
Yeah.
harmful stereotypes and conspiracy theories.
Exactly. It flips the script, showing a group that focuses on integrating into society, contributing to its well-being,
Right.
which is the complete opposite of what's often said about Jewish communities.
Yeah. Let's dig deeper into this protocol of Elder Jawa after a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be back soon to see how it contrasts with Avram's ideology and what it might tell us about the power of positive influence versus, straight-up manipulation.
So we were just talking about the protocol of Elder Jawa, which is like this positive philosophy, right?
Yeah.
It seems to be all about integrating into society and supporting progress.
Yeah.
It's a pretty stark contrast to how Avram and the mainstream media are using that chosen people narrative.
It is. It's a huge difference. Avram uses that idea of being chosen to justify what he does, to say he's in control. But the Jawa philosophy, it's all about blending in, contributing to the well-being of all civilizations, not just their own.
Yeah, it's like they get it.
Yeah.
They understand and respect different cultures.
Right.
And they work towards, like, a common good.
Exactly. It makes you think about all the different ways power can show up,
Totally.
Avram is all about control manipulation, but the Jawa way suggests that real power comes from understanding, empathy, and actually wanting to make the world a better place.
And it's not just, like, a philosophy.
Ah.
It's about actually doing something.
Yeah.
The story shows how the Jawa people actively support different societies.
Right.
They emphasize positive influence, not just control.
That's a good point. So we have BNN pushing this dominant pro-Israel narrative, the
Yeah.
Gifted, offering this alternative space.
Mm-hmm.
And now the protocol of Elder Jawa presenting a whole other way of thinking about power and influence.
Right, like the story's giving us this whole spectrum of approaches to information.
Yeah.
And how it can be used.
Exactly. And it really underlines how important it is to be aware of these different approaches,
Yeah.
as we navigate this world of information, both in this story and in real life.
Yeah.
We have to remember that narratives are rarely neutral.
Right.
There's always an agenda, a perspective, a specific lens through which information is being filtered.
It makes you wonder, is there ever such a thing as truly objective information?
Right.
Or are we always being influenced by someone's agenda, even if it's not obvious?
That's a tough question.
It is.
I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
But Earth's Mightiest definitely encourages us to be more critical about the information we take in.
Oh, yeah.
It reminds us that we have a responsibility to question the stories we're given,
Right.
especially the ones coming from people or organizations who benefit from shaping how we see things.
And speaking of questioning narratives,
Yeah.
there's another character who challenges the status quo.
Oh, yeah.
Sergeant Sharia.
Right.
He's this disillusioned war veteran, converts to Islam,
Okay.
and he becomes this symbol of resistance
Interesting.
against both the corrupt U.S. government and Avram's, tyranny.
He's fascinating because he represents this rejection
Yeah.
of both the dominant story and the whole system that keeps it going.
Right? He sees the hypocrisy of the U.S. blindly supporting Israel while sending its own soldiers to die in a conflict that doesn't benefit them.
Exactly. And he's not afraid to say it, which is the
There's
bigger...
that powerful line where he's like, have you ever seen Israel participate as a UN peacekeeping army in history? That's what they are. They never want to put their life on the front line because of low numbers people. All they want is serve, not serve. So much for God's chosen people.
Yeah.
It's harsh,
Yeah.
but it reflects how unhappy the American people are in this story.
Yeah, it does. It also points out that questioning the mainstream story,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to power and control,
Yeah.
can make you a target. It can isolate you. But Sergeant Sharia's character shows us that it's necessary if we want a fairer world.
He wants people to think for themselves, to reject manipulation,
Right.
to fight for what they believe in.
It's powerful, especially in a world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the information and propaganda.
And it's interesting how the story contrasts Sergeant Sharia's approach with Avram's.
How so?
Avram wants to dominate and control,
Right.
while Sergeant Sharia focuses on building a just and fair society.
He wants to empower people.
Yeah.
To give them the tools and courage to think for themselves and create a better future.
And then you have Jinx, the Jawa character, who really embodies those principles of the Elder Jawa Protocol.
Right. He's skilled in martial arts,
Yeah.
but also so adaptable. He understands the importance of blending in, supporting the societies he's a part of.
He even challenges Avram, points out his hypocrisy, says Avram doesn't really get what it means to be a Jew.
Oh, wow.
It's a really powerful moment. Jinx is saying that true Jewish identity is about compassion, justice, making the world a better place.
Right. He's directly challenging how Avram twists the whole chosen people idea.
Exactly. And their final showdown isn't just about fighting, it's about their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Jinx, representing those Jawa principles, ends up beating Avram, who's totally consumed by his ego and his belief that he's superior.
It's like a metaphor, right?
Yeah,
Understanding, compassion, and working together are stronger than manipulation and control.
totally. It's a hopeful message.
It is.
Saying that even when powerful forces try to control the story,
Yeah.
truth and justice can win.
It really speaks to how powerful individual action can be. Each character in Earth's Mightiest shows a different way to deal with power and information. Some manipulate, some resist, some build something new. It reminds us that we all have choices to make about how we move through the world and take part in the conversation about truth, justice, and the power of stories.
So where does that leave us? This whole world of conflicting narratives and different approaches to power and information. What's the takeaway for us?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is awareness.
Right.
Earth's Mightiest, even with its fantastical stuff, holds up a mirror to our world.
Yeah,
It shows how we're constantly bombarded with information meant to shape how we think.
it really does.
It encourages us to be discerning, to question our sources, to look for diverse perspectives.
It's not about blindly trusting anyone. It's about knowing that information is rarely neutral.
Right.
Every story has an author. Every narrative has an agenda. We have to dig deeper, ask questions, form our own educated opinions.
Exactly. And it's a process that never ends. The story doesn't stop when we close the book or turn off the podcast. It's an ongoing conversation,
Yeah.
and we're all shaping the narrative of our world.
This deep dive has really made me think about how I consume information, how easy it is to get caught up in a specific narrative without questioning it. What about you? What stood out to you?
You know, it's kind of wild how Earth's Mightiest shows that even with superheroes, like, the main game is still controlling the story, right? We've got BNN pushing their agenda,
Yeah.
but then there's The Gifted, this website that seems to be a place where superheroes can talk outside of, like, the mainstream media.
Right, and that's where things get tricky.
Yeah.
The Gifted might look like this alternative source, like the place to get the real deal.
Yeah.
But it makes you ask, is anything really unbiased?
It's like those echo chambers you see online.
Exactly.
People think they're getting a different view,
Uh-huh.
but they're just surrounded by stuff that backs up what they already believe.
And the story touches on that with the organization, that secret group Jinx and Bully are in.
Right, right.
They have their own way of doing things, their own hierarchy, their own truth.
It's like a mini version of BNN, just with a different goal.
Makes you wonder, can you ever really escape the influence of the people in power?
It's a tough question the story leaves us with.
It is.
Even with superpowers, real freedom of information seems hard to find. There's always someone trying to shape the narrative or
Always.
control how people see things.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. It's easy to get comfy, to think we're too smart to be manipulated, especially by the media. But Earth's Mightiest shows how sneaky and widespread these influences can be.
Absolutely. It reminds us to always be questioning,
Yeah.
to look at the information we're taking in critically,
Right.
to realize there's more than one side to every story.
I think we've unpacked this world of Earth's Mightiest pretty well and how it shows us media manipulation. Any final thoughts?
I think the story really leaves us with this sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just know about these issues.
Right.
We have to actually do something. We have to think critically, look for different perspectives, and challenge those narratives that try to divide us.
And on that note, dear listener, we'll leave you with this. How can you be a smarter consumer of information? How can you challenge the stories that shape how you see the world?
Remember, the power to shape the narrative isn't just in the hands of the media or the powerful. It's in each of us.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.